are allowed to approve minutes even if you weren't at the meeting or part of the committee at the time. That's okay. And I wasn't at most of those meetings. I think I was at one, but it was 2022. So I think the other planning staff were there. Yeah. Great.
I second.
Second.
All in favor of approving these minutes?
Yes. Dakota, you can give your thumbs up.
Yeah.
All right, motion carries.
Great. Thank you. Okay. And we don't have any public comment? Yes. And then we have, now I'm going to give you a brief presentation on CFAC. Dakota, can you see the screen change? Okay.
Oh. I actually cannot.
Okay, hang on. I'll stop and reshare. Does it just fade out?
I'm seeing Oregon City parking code updates.
Yes.
Perfect.
Good. Okay, so this is a one-page graphic that, it's really small. Okay, let's try that again. I'm going to zoom in on these individual boxes to explain what they mean, but this is a one-page summary graphic that Brian Davis of Studio Davis prepared. We've had a couple of meetings with our ad hoc committee to talk through these code amendments. We haven't started any code amendment process yet, but the basic gist behind the climate-friendly and equitable communities legislation is it's within the Oregon Administrative Rules for Transportation. And the legislature passed a lot of mandates with respect to parking requirements for cities and counties throughout the state. And in a city like Oregon City, which is part of a regional center within a metro urban growth boundary, we already have a lot of different parking regulations. We have minimum and maximum parking regulations based on spaces based on land use, and how those parking spaces are supposed to be designed and landscaped. What these code amendments are trying to do is eliminate minimum parking requirements in a couple of different areas of cities. Whenever they're within a half mile of a frequent transit corridor, and I'll zoom in on this map. 6,400, that's a lot. So this is here briefly. This is a map of the city with the half-mile overlay, if you will, within from bus line 33, and it takes in most of the commercial and a big chunk of the residential parts of the city already. So within that buffer, it's an absolute mandate to not require parking. Outside of that buffer, cities have a couple of choices. They can either get rid of parking minimums citywide, and a lot of cities have already done that, or they can take a more selective approach and continue to require parking for certain uses and not others. So the types of uses within our regional center and downtown area that City Commission has some concerns about, where we have mixed use areas and Within our mixed use areas, you can do multifamily apartments and that sort of thing. Apartments, mixed use, schools, childcare, eating and drinking establishments, any development within a half mile of the corridor, historic buildings, small commercial properties, and those seeking LEED certification. Those are all pretty much mandated not to require parking. They can still provide parking at their own discretion up to a certain maximum. So if we were to adopt some changes, which we're planning to do, we already have some parking maximums, but we might have to tweak them a little bit for certain land uses. The other part of the legislation is in section 0425, which states that parking mandates will be reduced for developments that include certain features, including solar or wind power production capacity, inclusion of car sharing spaces, electric vehicle charging stations, and additional accessible car spaces, ADA accessible car spaces above the minimum required. So those are all things that our current code kind of already does. We might need to tweak a few things, but overall, I think we're there. And if we're going to go down the route of still requiring some minimum parking in the few areas outside that buffer, we have to do certain things. We must allow shared parking. So we have to choose, and we do this in the parking code already. You can count car parking minimum spaces within 1,000 feet of your proposed development and not have to provide that parking on site. And then as long as you show some sort of a shared parking agreement, which is part of the land use record, it has to be approved either as a condition of land use approval or some other method, then we can do that. And we've done that a lot in the mixed use corridor. It's because there's not a lot of, they're meant to be pedestrian, walkable, parking is usually put behind the building or to the side and then minimized and that sort of thing. But because they are also built up areas, they are, and they are constrained with parking, especially if there's no parking on the street. We also allow on-street parking to count towards minimum on off-street parking as well, if it abuts the land use. But I don't want to get too into the weeds on the code, but it requires a slightly higher percentage of carpool and van pool shared spaces. You've got to allow or perhaps incentivize any redevelopment of parking areas for things like parklets, like during COVID, a lot of restaurants would put their eating area out in the parking lot. That became a permanent program. Or for bike or other mobility devices to use those parking spaces. So for example, if somebody said, "Oh, no, I'm not going to do that. That's my minimum parking," we'd say, "No, you have to allow it, and that minimum parking is not a thing." So that's kind of where planning would say, "No, you've got to allow it." So it's kind of it's an interesting way to look at it. The other part of it is we have to allow and encourage redevelopment of underused parking. I'm not sure exactly what that means. It may involve other departments, public works, for example, and stormwater, and some incentives for that. As far as the landscaping goes, if you're doing a new parking lot over a quarter acre in size, which is 20,000 square feet, roughly, you've got to provide 40% tree canopy within the parking lot. And we're pretty close to that, but we don't actually have a percentage number for the entire parking lot. We have like a square foot and a tree number per parking space. And so, but it doesn't necessarily get to the 40% that they're looking for. And they either have to provide that tree canopy or allow solar in the place of the trees as so there's a lot of small tweaks to the existing code that potentially need to be made. Our consultant is tasked with doing a code sort of an audit, but I think staff's going to have a pretty big role in the actual amending of the code just because we know it better. So, and that's intended to be adopted by mid 2025, but we've requested and been granted 3 extensions of the deadline because of the timing of hiring the consultant, because the consultant works on behalf of DLCD and DLCD manages the grant. So that took a while to get figured out. It took about 3 months more than we expected. And then anyway, and then also we had a sort of a prolonged discussion at the city commission level about which direction did they want to go. You know, first question was, did they want to eliminate all parking citywide, or did they want to take a, you know, a more bifurcated approach? And the direction that we got from city commission was to go down the option 2, if is what they call it. But that's kind of where we're at now. We haven't started on any code amendments yet, but we will be. And I'm hoping that by February, we would actually have some code to show you in terms of red lines or code amendments. So, what else about this?
Pete, can I
Yeah.
jump in really quick? I don't know what DLCD is.
Sorry, I used an acronym. Department of Land Conservation and Development.
Okay.
So they're the state agency who sets broad land use policy for the state. And so in terms of all our comprehensive plan and our zoning amendments and all that stuff has to be acknowledged by DLCD. There's still a lot of room for local government to make their own code and drive their own policy. That's slightly less true now than it used to be because of statewide emergency housing declarations and statewide climate emergency declarations, and DLCD under Governor Brown and Governor Kotek really moved forward with an expansive set of administrative rules and said local government must follow these, which is it's new to a lot of planners. But it's funny because a lot of planners have been trying to do that sort of thing for 15 years, but until the state stepped in, you know, it's like they couldn't really get traction. So it's a double-edged sword sometimes. And I think it does tend to, it makes sense in the big picture, but cities who are interested in home rule sometimes get rubbed the wrong way and that sort of thing. But it is intended to also foster a pretty significant public outreach program. So there is, that's why we formed the committee, and we have a website about this. And we're doing some public involvement, but the grant isn't very big. It's about 25 grand. So.
I was just going to ask a question ancillary to this.
Yeah.
How many charging stations do we have, and where are they located, or do you know?
I don't know, Doug.
There's not many.
Not many. There's
Red soils. I think that's
yeah,
red soils.
that's where I charge my.
Yeah, I think there's like 5 there, but they're all like the slow charge, which means you have to keep it there for like a day or 2 to really make a meaningful charge on your vehicle.
It's already in the building code for certain developments that get to 40-something spaces. So they have to put the conduit in, you know, if it's a new park. So.
You know, if it's like I forget. It's like 1, 2, and 3. Like, is it the fast charging ones or the slow ones? Because like the slow ones.
I think it has to support a level 2. I'm not sure.
Okay, I feel like that's like, I don't know if that is something that would be in the code, but.
It might be.
Like my partner and I have an electric vehicle, and we're realizing that the slow charge ones unless it's like you're staying there for like hours and hours,
Right.
it's really doesn't do anything. Like it's not even worth it to plug it in,
Right.
especially if you have like a vehicle like charging thing at your house.
Right.
I feel like that might be wrong. Like why go for the slow charge ones and
Mhm.
the faster ones? Because it's
Well,
like
it's true. There are a
it's
lot
like
of,
a couple miles. Like you go in to get groceries, you charge your car for an hour, and you have like 3 more miles. Like it's not even worth it. So like, what's the point? It satisfies the requirement, but I feel, I don't know. That seems relevant, maybe.
sure. I mean, everybody would want the most efficient charger for the buck, especially local government.
Because then more people could use it. Like if you're gonna get 100 miles of charge,
Yeah.
if you do the slow charge one, it's gonna take like 24 hours, and
Sure.
one person could use it. Whereas the fast one, you could have like 8 people get 100
Okay.
miles of charge within
That's
the
a
same
good
period
point.
of time.
Yeah.
So it would service more people
Mhm.
and would actually meaningfully bolster the electric vehicle capacity
Okay. Yeah. So,
significantly, I think.
okay, that's great.
Is that technology that you have to keep up with? Oh, so you install it and then in a couple of years, is it obsolete? Have to
Yeah.
update it?
Well, the requirements, I should back up because the requirement is to put the infrastructure conduit and cables, not the actual charger itself, although there's a lot of grants out there that would allow you to go the whole way and do that. PGE has a program, the state has a
Yeah,
program.
they're not that, I mean, it's,
Yeah.
$500 as opposed
Yeah.
to, I don't know. I mean, that's for the fast one, it's like 500, so it's not huge.
So it's a requirement now, and it probably is going to affect municipal lots as well as, public lots as well as private. It does, because they're both subject to the same rules. And what else is going on?
Pete, can I
Yeah,
jump in with a question?
yeah, bike parking.
Would you maybe,
Bike park. That's the end of the presentation.
okay, I just want to back up a little bit and understand what this committee can and will do as a result. Like, I understand the information that you're giving us.
Yeah.
So where are we going to be asked to weigh in? How can we help or support?
Yeah. When the time comes, i.e. February, I think, when there's code, draft code, we would probably ask for your thumbs up support for the amendments and then send that along to Planning Commission and or City Commission, depending on the timing. Timing wise, where I have a little,
Yeah, I was a part of these meetings with different community members with the consultant. And one of the questions that we couldn't really answer was about the EV charging station, because none of us tried electric vehicle. So that was a question. But really meaningfully provide input. We hadn't really
yeah.
having more people with experience with the infrastructure and the limitations that exist is going to be helpful.
Yeah, and we haven't actually applied this yet because we haven't seen any parking lots that trigger it. But it does have to go into effect by, mid 2025 or there. So it's fast track, really. Not a lot of meetings before we get into public hearings, but we plan to have these groups. I'm doing this presentation tonight. We're going to have a presentation to Transportation Advisory Committee, I believe in February, not January. Youth Advisory Committee, Library Board, CIC, an open house before the first Planning Commission meeting. And then we get into the legislative process, which would be in March, with hearings starting in March. Going through May, June, possibly into July.
Is Brian the consultant?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I don't know what that meant. Anyway, I'll get out of that.
So what we, let's say, is to weigh in on these proposed changes.
Yeah. I'm not asking for anything tonight.
Right.
I'm just sharing information.
Yeah.
And their mandates. So, they're going to move forward with or without board or committee support. But the objective is to get people involved, especially people who are affected by it. In, for example, multifamily development in the city. Probably needs to be aware that they may have to start putting in charging if they're redeveloping their parking lots and that sort of thing. So we attempted to cast a wide net. We asked all of our developers in a developer stakeholders group, and some of them I think are on the committee, but it's a broad.
So just to clarify, I'm kind of thinking out that like these will happen regardless. But the job of the committee and the consultant is to kind of just like iron out the details and put in specific language.
Well, the comment you made about the level of charging is a good comment. It's the kind of thing I think that we're going to look at everything we hear and say, well, is this implementable at a local level? Is it something the state requires or not? Is it something the city commission wants to do independent of any requirement? That sort of thing. If they do, it's up to the city commission to make that call. And then other examples of where you guys can weigh in would be like on the landscaping revisions and tree requirements for the parking landscape. Currently, we have, we kind of refer to our street tree list a lot, but there's probably way more options for parking lot trees than just the trees on the street tree list.
The bigger species or like
bigger, or 40% canopy is a lot. It probably requires a requisite amount of soil volume because we never pay attention to soil volume. We always pay attention to this magical end product and wonder how we're going to get there after the roots have outgrown the parking, the strip. So there's that. But ultimately, property owners, property managers for parking lots are going to be responsible for maintaining that landscaping once it's in. There's like a 2-year period for public improvements where it'd be under warranty, but for private developers, once the landscaping's in and established, they don't post a performance bond that guarantees they have to replace it. It's all code enforcement driven at that point. Which is not a great way to do things, as you probably are aware. So.
You plant something and it properly dies.
Yeah, and it's like, did you just ignore your irrigation system? Oh, you did. Okay, we gotta replace that. And that's through code enforcement most of the time. Or we catch it on a smaller review for like some other aspect of the design, like if they're coming in and they're restriping the parking lot, like your landscaping's gone, you have none. You got to go in and replant that. That's another opportunity to catch it at the land use level. So,
question. We said there's like a grant for $25,000. What exactly is that meant?
Oh, that was
like, because this is obviously way beyond. This is something.
This is regulatory.
Okay. So
Yeah.
what is the grant?
Oh, it's for charging, putting in charging conduit and things like that. You can apply for grants to do that as a public entity. You can apply to do it as a private. Well, if you want, yeah.
Okay, so that,
Through PGE, for example.
okay, so that 25,000, that's not meant to cover all the infrastructure requirements?
No, I mean, I
That's
don't
just
know.
like on
It's-
public
I'm
property?
not even sure if it's that amount. I had heard that because our finance director was looking into a grant and they mentioned that amount. But, yeah. There may be more money out there than that.
And this isn't retroactive, so places that don't currently have bike and electric, these are just for new developments, is that correct?
New development or redevelopment, and that's going to need to be something we actually put in the code because what does redevelopment mean? Does it mean if you go in and put a new inch of asphalt over your parking lot and you didn't ask for a permit to do it, it's really, really hard to to fix that situation after it happens. That's happened a lot.
Because people come in asking for forgiveness.
And well, yeah, exactly. And they're like, well, okay, you were just maintaining your parking lot, but you created a whole new parking lot because you actually paved over a significant chunk of gravel in order to do it. Hardened gravel downtown below the trestle, for example, major parking areas like corner 14 and others. Not just 14. That is hard to track. And so it's a question of getting the word out, people being vigilant, code enforcement, other employees, Yeah. Any other comments on the CFEC stuff?
Does everyone understand that the dark green boxes are from state
Yes.
telling us to do these things?
These are the OARs.
And then the kind of lighter green boxes are areas where Oregon City has already implemented some of those requirements, or
Yeah.
where they would fit
That's
it with
right.
an existing code and maybe there's some adjusting to be made to make it completely aligned with what the state mandates.
Yeah. There's a second slide I was going to show you, but it gets a little frizzy because it's the decision-making process for the city commission that we showed them a couple months ago when we were asking for what direction they wanted to go in. So I'm not showing it this time around, but Brian will probably talk about it in February. If he doesn't, I'll ask him to. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Next up. Oh yeah, this is the slide I was talking about. But I don't think this slide is in your packet, but I can happily share that. Okay. How's it going, Dakota? You seeing everything?
I am seeing and hearing perfectly. Thank you.
Good. Okay, great. So next up, share the screen again. Oh. All right. First, I'll show you this. No, yeah, I'm lost. I'm lost in screens. Mercy. Okay. Okay. Dakota, do you see some red lines of the city code?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so I'll give you a little context here. Chapter 12.08 of the city code is the public tree code. This is the code that governs the right-of-way trees and trees in public parks and on city-owned property. And planning department issues street tree permits for property owners whose responsibility it is to care for the trees abutting their property in the right-of-way. So we have a free permit program. In that code, there is also a section on general tree maintenance, which talks about that obligation of the property owner to water, trim, to remove dead branches, and maintain clearances of 7 feet above sidewalks, 8 feet above clear vision areas or sight triangles, and 14 feet clearance above the street. Public Works has some concerns about various things that I'll go into and wants to modify these clearance distances to slightly more. 8 feet above the sidewalk, 10 feet above in a clear vision area, and 14 feet over the street. Samantha, you had sent an email, which I put in the packet with some recommendations. You want to talk about what those were?
Sure.
Yeah.
So the recommendation is to raise basically crown raising along sidewalks and streets. So
Here's your,
the recommendation is basically raising everything from current standards to 8 feet above sidewalks and 10 feet from vision clearance. And I think that's for for intersections, or is that signage?
it's intersections of streets, and the size of the vision area depends on the speed posted on the road. And it's supposed to be, it's a really weird engineering standard. It's kind of hard to understand. But if you're sitting in your car, which is your height of eye, at the line on the stop where you're supposed to stop, you're supposed to have a clear vision triangle of the abutting oncoming traffic on the intersecting street. And within that clear vision triangle, you're not allowed to have any fences over a certain height. It does allow for trees in that vision triangle. If you read that section of code 1032, it says, except trees can remain, which I think is important. And they're asking that the trimming height on trees within the vision triangle be raised to 10 feet. So you had made a comment that it should be less on residential streets and 11 feet and 14 feet above main arterials. I'll share with you what Josh said in response to that, and we can just run through these. So he said, staff found the following in a research: Oregon City, we just talked about Beaverton, 8-foot sidewalk, 12 over the street. Portland, 8 foot over the sidewalk, 14 over the street. Gresham, 8 foot over the sidewalk, 12 over the street. Hillsborough, 8 and 15. Vancouver, 8 and 14. And then he mentions the height of various city trucks and vehicles that they do for sweeping, and the vac truck, which is the sewer vacuum and that sort of thing. So they want to make the codes consistent with metro area codes because they frequently have contractors who think they're in one jurisdiction and need another, which makes sense. I get that. And bottom line is, he said, Public Works retains a recommendation of 8 foot over sidewalk and 14 over the street, all streets for those reasons. I had a conversation with Josh. I said, there's various concerns about pruning and crown raising and how that might affect tree canopy. And there's some recommendations on adopting best practices for pruning to go along with this. And it went nowhere. So Josh said that, if the NRC doesn't support these amendments, they're not going to go forward at all. And I said, okay, that's fine. So I don't have any qualms about your recommendation on these code amendments at all. I feel, that there should be some give and take and dialogue involved in this section of the code amendment, because it's 1208, which is the public tree code, which you have provided a lot of time and energy amending over the years. So for those very reasons, I just feel like there should be a little more process.
And I want to make a comment and ask the question.
Yeah.
I think the comment I want to make is these comparison cities,
Yeah.
I wouldn't consider comparable in like size. I guess the simplest way to say it, or traffic.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So though I appreciate them doing the work to gather this information, I'm concerned that's not as relevant as they might have thought it was. And the question I want to ask, I guess, publicly, just to make sure that we're saying it out loud, is the burden of compliance with this proposed change would be on the property owners, right?
You're right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Thanks for asking the question, because they would generally go out, provide notice that they're going to be doing maintenance on a street, or bringing a truck through, or doing whatever. And then, either using door hangers or knocking on doors, whoever's home, provide some level of notice, but I don't know how routine that is.
I have one more question, and this might be a takeaway, which is, can we gather or consider city data on like damage to city vehicles or damage to city trees based on, like the street sweeper hitting a branch? Does that happen all the time? Is it costing the city a lot of money? Because if it is, then that's important for us to understand. But if it's never happened, or if it happens once a year, that's important too.
Okay.
The garbage trucks prune one of my trees all the time.
But does it cost you anything or them anything,
Prune.
I just, if we're going to ask X% of landowners in Oregon City to spend time and money, and we should be able to justify it by saying, like, look, this is the cost. So if we can quantify some of that, I think it would be helpful.
Okay.
Or just even like number of complaints, like for the sidewalk one, I mean, maybe that's not affecting people driving vehicles so much as pedestrians. Like, is that 7 feet not sufficient? Like, why are we changing that? Because, that just affects pedestrians, and most people aren't 7.5 feet tall. And so I would think that would not be that relevant. Like, not to say that these recommendations aren't, standard. But yeah, comparables for Milwaukee, Westland, Canby, those seem like population wise, that would be a little bit more relevant to Oregon City. I like your idea of just look at the numbers. Like, is this currently a problem? That's unclear to me whether or not it's a current problem. I think those would be really relevant statistics to have, even if it's, the city has no information on this, which maybe means that it's not a problem. I don't know. But if it isn't a problem, especially because most landowners, I'm imagining, probably aren't even going to be aware of this change, and developers might, they can certainly trim to the standard that they're accustomed to. Just because Oregon City has different standards, it doesn't mean that they're abiding by those, I guess. And so, like, who is this really affecting? I don't know. Those are just questions I have.
Well, and look, if someone has spent the time to make this recommendation, I think part of our responsibility is to allow them to explain further. So I don't want to dismiss it by any means.
That's good.
Want to continue to say that, like, let's gather the information. Like, I would even go to this person's side and say, great, let's justify it. Like, let's identify some intersections where the police report says the Canopy causes accidents more than one time in a year, or, you know, like, let's just dig into the data. Maybe you can take the posture of, like, let's try and prove the point that they're making with the recommendation. And if we can, then great. I think we can probably get behind it. But if we go and try to prove the point with the data and we can't, then I'm reluctant to impose that burden on a number of landowners.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
I'd like to say something too, just about the height of the vehicles, which the city purchases those vehicles to maintain our streets and to maintain our sewer system. And so if we're suggesting maybe 11 foot would be the height and the vehicles were over 12 foot, I too would like to hear from Public Works, maybe have a representative come and talk about, you know, this is precluding our vehicles from getting in to clean the sewer, to do street maintenance, and that's a problem too. So maybe looking at those needs versus the comparisons more so. How much is this stopping us from maintaining our systems?
Yeah, okay.
No, I think, because I mentioned it because it's true, but the ones that we see the most are public works vehicles where many of them are told, and also B&B leasing, to find out what their experiences have been.
I'm sorry.
Because I wasn't being just garbage going to be Oregon City garbage. Yeah.
I will ask Vance, our operations manager for Public Works, because that data is probably going to come from.
Because all the vehicles are going to have to be close to the curb, and you know they can't avoid what they're doing. I mean,
Right.
Yeah.
It's no good.
Something else is to consider, like in my neighborhood, there's some street signs in the trees. Depending on how tall the street signs are, the trees are blocking the street signs that are actually warnings of curvatures in the streets that should be warning for the drivers that get in the way. If people aren't maintaining those, they're blocked. So,
Yeah, the trees.
so what height would those have measured that sign? Would it be interesting?
Yeah, that seems really relevant. I feel like I come across that way more often where signs are just blocked by verbiage on.
So what would be the typical height for that?
I would guess that those are already outside of code,
Yeah, if they're both.
Yeah.
like the way it's written now. But I mean, you know, I think that the people making this recommendation should just come and continue to make the case. Because if we were to support it, we're supporting an additional burden on landowners. And so, like, let's do that responsibly for them.
And hopefully the feedback to Public Works is that we want to support it, but we would like just more information about the specifics.
Yeah, that's really what
Okay. Should be able to get that by February.
I guess it's sort of obvious, but you're growing a new tree and it's not going to be up to 8 or 15 level when you're trying to get that tree to grow up. So,
We're regulating the growing space of a tree to such an extent now. It's like, where in fact can this tree grow? Right there. That's it. Not up there. If you looked at all the different regulations that zoning and otherwise, it would be pretty phenomenal because it's like some are guidelines, some are actual rules. You know, like the street tree recommendation is like recommended species under power lines, etc. You know, so
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Huh. Okay, thank you. That's great. We'll do a motion to table.
I get a motion to table the tree pruning, request.
I'll make a motion to table the tree pruning request.
Second.
All in favor?
Hi.
Dakota, I can't see you. Did you raise your
Oh,
hand?
sorry, hang on. Go.
It's a yes, it's I.
Well, thank you.
There you are.
You can unmute yourself, Dakota. You don't have to wait for permission.
I'm still getting used to this interface, Dakota, because we're sitting here, we can see you, we can see what I had up on the screen, and then we can see a little photo with all of us in the corner. It's very busy.
Right. Yes. I'll keep myself muted, just for any background noise purposes, but yes.
All right.
Aye.
Don't be shy. All right, and that brings us to our final agenda item, which is the NRC's recommendation to the City Commission with respect to tree canopy. So is that open?
It's just correct. Do
Okay.
you want me to close it?
Yeah. Go ahead. I don't think we're getting any more tonight.
Yeah.
So far we've discussed this at the joint meeting of the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee. Then, according to Tom Kissinger, the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee had a brief discussion about it at their last October meeting. And there's no minutes of that yet, but there is a YouTube video and I haven't watched it. What Tom told me was that Pratt is kind of demurred on the letter because they're more concerned about the parks and the maintenance of the parks, and they support the idea of a canopy assessment and that sort of thing, but when it comes to actually changing tree code, they're a little out of their league. So that's what he told me, which is a synopsis of, I don't know if you say synopsis or what.
I think the reason we requested that, we were hoping that we could have you report that supported by both committees.
By both committees, yeah. To date, what I've done is I sent Sam some sidebar comments, and then based on those, she made some changes to the last draft based on what I said, and that's what this is. And then just a little context on the City Commission timing. City Commission's February meeting on the budget, throughout February, there'll be budget meetings going on. But their retreat is when they decide whether or not they're going to actually take on any new budget obligations or change staffing around in the departments or anything and stuff like that. So Aquila would love to get this before the City Commission at this mid-January meeting, which means we need to make a decision, really need to make a decision tonight. But we can also, I'll tell you what I think of the letter. I think it's good. I think there's one clarification that I would make, and it's a very small one. I think as if you were presenting this to the City Commission, you could just point out, for example, that Section 4 has the digest, if you will, of recommendations if they were to skip ahead. And, if they want more context and background and reason, they can read the whole thing, but if they want to skip ahead and go to straight to what it is you're recommending, that section 4 has got it right there.
Okay.
Because you're talking about city forester, robust tree code, urban forest management plan, doing some public engagement, adopting industry best practices for assessing hazard trees, and developing clear policy for tree retention and in sidewalk situations. I think it makes very clear what the concern is with respect to mature trees on development properties, which is not in section 4, but I read through that section on that, and I think that is absolutely right. It's correct, technically and otherwise. I think section 3 is correct, mostly. No, I think section 3 is absolutely correct.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
trying really hard.
Yeah,
To get your
Section
technical
1,
recommendations in there.
the Tree City USA data is not just permit data, it's an amalgamation of data and of tree maintenance in general and permit data. So that's the only thing I would add on that section.
Which one?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm skipping around, but under section 1, it's like, to what extent do we understand our current canopy? And it says, city reports, Tree City USA, document removal, pruning, and replacement to ODF.
Where is it?
It's the first paragraph.
First paragraph, first page, or second, under 1, the first paragraph under 1.
Okay.
These reports stem from permit data from 3 city departments. We could just say data for it, but we say permit data and maintenance data, something like that.
Just data.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But don't represent an accurate or thorough assessment of tree count. That's true, they don't. And given that gap of information, we need a public tree inventory. I personally don't have a problem with the length of this document now that I know that you could basically recommend that if they're only going to read one section, read section 4, because they might only read section 4.
Should we just like put that note at the beginning, or just like, or just write it on, just like, for somebody for this?
Well, there'll be a cover report on this when it goes to the city commission for discussion. So, but yeah.
I mean, because if 4 is like a summary, then having it in the middle, maybe, or just like mentioning it if they
We all think.
part of it.
Well, part of the limitation of section 4 is that it doesn't talk too much about development.
Right.
So I'm a little nervous about saying like, if you're too tired to read the whole thing, because I'm gonna miss an important part.
You did both, so that like.
I mean, I'm happy to sit down with them and like, you know, maybe give them a cup of coffee, help them. But like, I agree that condensing would be very helpful. And I would like input and assistance on that. So I'm not thinking this is the best and final draft that could possibly ever happen out of tonight, but I know that we want to get this tied up and out the door. I'm not sure it's ready yet, but what do you guys?
What I was thinking was that we have this, but you could have this cover sheet that actually poses what are essentially the items here, to what extent, and pose the questions on a cover sheet. Have all these questions on a cover sheet, and then on the same cover sheet, when it comes to 4, take those bold place first sentences. And that's the cover sheet to this document. I don't know what you think about, but rather than you've been through this so much.
Well, I don't want it to be Sam's letter is my other
Right.
concern.
And so,
So this is my voice a lot, and there's a lot of voice coming in from staff, which is valuable. But this is coming from the NRC, so I want to be true to that, and not overlook
right.
your valuable.
So just say on top of this, just have those items you have right there in the front on one sheet and then have the rest of the document there. That will make that reference. Might be the easiest way to,
Like a
for you
fact
to see it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to agree with Doug that the cover should be a one pager. The top half is like, what are the problems or questions? I'm just saying what you said again. And then the bottom half is what are our answers? And then if you want more details, go ahead and read the thing.
That's right.
Thing number one. Thing number two, I want to ask a question. And I've missed a couple of meetings, so forgive me. But I just want to make sure that we've given enough context and explanation to Monica and Dakota about like what this is, what it means, what we're trying to accomplish, timeline, all that. And, you know, both of you feel that we're there and we can move on. But because I don't know, I want to make sure, I want to ask, have we given you guys the comment, like, do you understand what this is and the implications and what's our part in those things?
I don't understand the full background or time when we're trying to meet, but I've been to the last meeting and read it before that meeting. And I've done a little research and read what you've written, and I understand that part. But I don't have the background or what the time points are.
Well,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just going to kind of echo that exact same thing. I read the iteration that, you know, we had before and attended obviously the last meeting, but I think the timeline is really also what I'm not 100% clear on. But again, the
What you're saying about that, I don't think it changes that. I also don't think it changes, what do you say? The fact that, yes, the city does contract out a lot of arborist work. I have no idea how much. It's just different department managers doing different contracts. So, yeah.
That's a really interesting question to ask.
Yeah, it is.
Because
We need a cost benefit because if there's no room for an additional staff member, but there is funds to spend, say, $100,000 on arboriculture work. Like that's an easy, you know.
That's usually the better alternative.
Yeah, I mean, that could be one sentence. This is how much we're paying for this work. This is how much we could pay a staff person to do the exact same work
Right.
and not have a conflict of interest because they're not personally profiting off of tree removals.
Right.
They're just there.
Yeah. Okay. The only other thing I'd add is that it's not just the salary, it's also the bennies, which is anywhere from 50 to 85% of the position. So
I think the takeaway ask is what do we spend on contractors, arborists here? Is that right?
I mean, it's a subpar. I mean, I don't think it needs to be, but if it's like some egregious number,
But is it
like obviously.
500,000,
I think
million?
explode during like winter storms.
right.
Yeah,
That could be the middle of
Anyway.
that budget for the big umbrella of arboriculture.
Yeah.
A lot of it is like storm response.
Yeah. Anything that's unplanned is going to be expensive.
So, but that's a decent question about like how much of the budget is associated to arboriculture contracting.
And is it even reasonable that one staff person could manage X amount? I mean, for a whole city like this size, like what is the
It's a really
standard?
good question. So
Like for X amount of people, how many arborists are traditionally needed for cities that don't subcontract for that work?
well, it probably depends on what kind of code system you have too. Do you regulate on residential property like Portland, Milwaukee, Lincoln, Oswego, or not? And then that will affect your staff because there's going to be at least, I think, 2 FTE. One is the arborist, or forester, or whoever. And the other part is probably code enforcement or half code enforcement, half permitting, because you get to do retro, most of the time you're telling someone apply for the permit they should have gotten in the first place as part of a code enforcement action. So that's not just planning, but public works as well.
Can we,
I'll say two.
can we even like present this without those numbers? I mean, isn't that just like, isn't it so much more impactful if we have like a ballpark?
Data is nice.
Is it possible to get that data? I mean, I feel
But I
like
think
it's been
most
brought
of
up
it-
in prior
Most of
conversations.
the recommendations have been based on code, right? And whether the code is working and how it doesn't do certain things, it does do others, right? We haven't really looked at money number, that's.
I mean, just hearing that 20 was like, there's not enough room for, that seems like it could use it into
Yeah, well,
some numbers, just so the
I
commission.
think that Tony was probably, talking to the managers, so don't go padding your budgets right now because we're right in the middle of a biennium, But we want to try to keep the spending in line as we go through the year. So that was part of the advice,
Are we, as next year, still within the biennium up through June? When does biennium end
June 30th.
of this coming year?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would love for this committee to be able to make a business plan that says, City of Oregon City, we have a plan to save you $100,000
Yeah.
by bringing on a community member in a long-term fashion to support our Canopy.
Yeah, it's probably more like 150 by the time the benefits.
Well, that's the cost of that.
That's the budget for a year.
But the question is, what are we spending on alternative?
No, but you're right.
Yeah, it needs to be comparative.
Right, and maybe there's not a there. Maybe we go look at those contracts and it's $50,000. I'm like, well, that's probably a good use of tax dollars. But if it's $500,000
Yeah.
and not including storm response, then it's like, well, maybe we can make a case to save the city some money and
Right.
provide better service.
And part of that
Yeah.
storm mitigation would be prevention, just like, health care, preventative care is the bulk of what,
Well,
staying
yeah,
healthy.
it'd be interesting.
Fix
to
the
see
trees to not fail in the first place, then you don't need to spend that much money to fix it.
how much is it, how much are they actually spending on maintenance or versus assessment? I don't know if they can break it out then, maybe.
And that's not even factored in, like you said, like the long-term preventative things that would end up saving the city money, like planting climate resistant plants, or like, plants that are going to hold up a little bit better,
Yeah,
which wouldn't be possible to see for like decades. So,
right.
I think if we're gonna get traction, it has to be dollars. Let's show how we can save the city money.
we could start with that and be like, here's all the other,
Well, yeah, so, well, it sounds like, would we want that in this letter now? I mean, there's no reason to stop this conversation after we submit the letter. We can keep talking about,
You keep talking about the numbers.
but, given that we want to get this kind of in front of the commission before they do their retreat, which is mid-January, February.
Yeah.
So we've got maybe like a couple weeks if we absolutely are not satisfied with the current draft now.
Yeah.
We have a we meet every other month.
Well, that's the difficulty. Our next meeting is until February unless we call a second, ad hoc Zoom meeting.
Right. If we want to meet in
And
January.
do that. There are a couple of new applications to the committee where I wanted to ask you if you wanted to have a second Zoom meeting before December is out or early January to take care of those interviews, because they tend to take a lot of time at the beginning of the meeting and then we start the meeting and they're already tired, So that's a possibility.
We have an opening,
So we have 2 terms limiting yours because you replaced somebody, I think. So you need to reapply. As do you leave.
Sam?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. So from Tissimo. Pardon? So city recorder's office allows now application throughout the year. I didn't know this. I thought it was all one period of time, but it's rolling applications all the time now. So I think we have to kind of roll with it a little bit, be prepared to do interviews in order to give a recommendation to the mayor to appoint. And if it, my initial thought, and it's not fully baked, was that we could do it using, well, we could meet in person, obviously. It's nice to do interviews in person. It's more what is convenient for the committee. Yeah, and I know you have other applications.
There's only two positions.
Two vacancies.
I think
Yeah. Coming up.
I would like to see, what's the individual that did.
Well,
Yeah, he's still in the running.
can we?
Yeah,
He's still in the.
Yeah, William Foster.
So I could apply. The point is, in the sense that I don't want to compete with.
Well, I guess also, I wanted to bring this up, and I don't know if this is like an appropriate time to do that, but just to talk about, because my impression when we interviewed everyone is that
Well,
we.
you want to take care of this one?
Yeah, let's go to the end.
Okay, all right, sorry.
Okay, so what is the consensus about the current draft? Barring the minor edit on page 1. And adding a cover letter to help guide
Right.
people through the document. And I'm happy to work with you on that. And anyone else is also welcome to help on that. I very much would like more voices involved, not just mine. Current draft.
Yeah, I support it.
I think we need numbers. Cost.
In this, in the letter? Or just
I mean, when-
accompanying it?
I don't know, like, what is
Yeah.
the difference? Like, would the commission see it all at the same time, or like,
I think that
when would they be looking at
I
this?
think the intent of this, yeah, okay, so in answer to your question, I think data would be good if it's available and we can get it to this letter. Yes. I think it would be a big, it's always nice to have.
What's the data for?
Show what the city's spending annually on arboricultural contracts and tree work in general. Wouldn't just necessarily be certified arborist work, although it probably is. I think that's the metric that we're looking at, right? I mean, I get the numbers from Tree City USA, but I don't know what the contracting part of it is.
This does convey the recommendation of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the current justification in the letter is that that position could save. That's the assertion, is that it could save FTE.
That's my problem.
Yeah.
You don't have the data to support it. I mean, we're saying 100,000. We don't know what the soft said in that, and I'd be really reluctant to put that into this document, especially if we in fact don't know the facts.
The other way that you could approach it is that we are, you could say as a committee, we are acutely aware of the cost implications of the position, and for this reason, we want to know what the city is spending on that.
You'll be presenting this, I presume, and
I'm happy to do that. I don't want to be alone.
you can build that into your verbal presentation.
Sure, yeah, I can expand
So
on
you got up
these
and,
things.
well, the other stuff that we don't know the information, but encourage them to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that could be part of her,
Yeah, and I would,
part of her follow-up, I guess, in her presentation.
when the time comes to present too, it'd be great to have as many NRC members in the audience as possible.
The alternative is to delay and wait for numbers. Is that right?
The alternative is to, well, yes, it is, but given the timing of the budget discussion,
In my opinion, I don't think we want to do that.
yeah,
I don't think one.
I think we definitely got to get in before February so that it's in front of the commission when they're talking about the budget.
So I think to Doug's point, the idea would be that we find a way, find some language to call out that there are some cost offsets and we are working to identify them.
Sure.
Mhm.
Maybe significant.
Yeah, that's good. We are working to identify them and so far found out the fall.
Yeah, and I think look at that. I think it'll be valuable to, if we can, filter out storm response stuff. Because that's just like a whole different thing.
Yeah.
And that might be hard with the data.
Yeah.
And one person can do it, right?
Yeah, but I think it would be valuable and it would demonstrate that we're being thoughtful about how we're presenting this case and not just saying like, well, in 2000 whatever, we spent $1 zillion, we should, get an arborist. Like that's not it. But in a normal year, under normal circumstances, like the work,
But the normal is,
there's no more normal and it's changing. Yeah.
we cannot expect a normal from 20, 30 years ago.
Well, maybe the way to look at it is to consider hours instead of dollars, like per person hours doing that tree work. Because then if it's 120 a week, we can say, well, we can offset that.
Yeah. I mean, you have to make some assumptions, right?
Yeah.
About the work that they're doing.
So I think the dollars and the hours would be valuable to gather.
When you have something like the ice storm and something like that, is the city able to secure disaster money to cover some of that?
I don't know, Doug. I don't know what we did. I think we got reimbursed for the ice storm damage several years ago when everybody took stuff down to the cove and dumped it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was, but I don't know who the agency was.
Yeah.
I think it was FEMA, maybe. Yeah. Mhm.
So I give you some point.
Yeah.
You talked about, I remember more than one person, but in Dutch Elm and Emerald Ash Borer and whatever else comes up in the future in order to, you need an inventory, you know.
Oh, FEMA reimbursements. Yeah. You can't get reimbursements for things you don't have in inventory.
Yeah, prove it. Yeah.
But also like, to mitigate. So yeah,
Yeah.
the cost is not just, an offset, of course, which is helpful for looking at just the regular biennium budget, but also like long-term better, all these things that are per management. But the other thing is, the other asks in the letter are smaller expense and can be supported by grants that are available. So those don't need to come out of and there's like no match.
Did you keep the grants piece in there?
So now that we're kind of in a new world with the election has changed. You don't know the future. Oh, wait, changing my mind. The Infrastructure Reduction Act funds for urban forestry in the state have been committed, meaning Oregon has all the money that they are ever going to get from that federal funding package. So if they don't spend it all out this year, we could have funds to apply for next year. So sorry to confuse everybody. There's grants that were available this past year. The deadline for that is passed for this round, but it's a 5-year grant package. So if they don't spend everything out this year, there could be money available next year to do like a Canopy analysis, which is not anywhere near the cost of it.
Yeah.
And lots of people start that way. First, people municipalities.
Mhm.
They start with baseline data and create a management plan or tree code,
Mhm.
and then build.
I would impress upon the commission how valuable a tree inventory is, even if you're not going past your code.
Oh, yes.
They just don't know what we have out
Okay, well, thanks very much for your input.
They're a lot of edge.
there. I can see more and more. Maybe I'm just sensitive.
It's incredible. The Emerald.
I'm sorry, what? Yeah. How far is it now?
Let's see, remember where it was?
Yes,
Remember calling?
a couple of them was over in Woodburn.
Yes, thank you. At any rate, so it's gonna be here sooner or later, but so okay, I'll go ahead and make those changes to the letter. Happy to present review. NRC be interested in seeing the cover letter, writing input on that.
Yeah.
I'm not great at condensing, so
I can go through and just kind of try to remove like, I don't, it's a great letter. Like, I'm hesitant to remove anything, but I can go through.
You're kind of just pulling up introductory sentences and putting them in place, so I'm doing.
Yeah.
I mean, if you got it done and send it out to us, that's fine, but I don't think we have to have a meeting or anything to approve it.
yeah, I don't need another meeting. I just want to make sure I'm speaking independently on them.
I mean, you've just taken the feedback that involved in. Okay, just a lot of work because there's been a lot of feedback.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good job.
Motion to approve the letter to the commission pending discuss edits and cover letter
And adding in some budget numbers,
and adding
some cost.
cost, current budget for arboriculture
Yeah.
spend,
Cost data is available.
cost data available.
Sure. Oh, move.
I need a motion.
Yeah. I mean, move.
Second.
All in favor?
Okay.
Yay. Thank you, everybody.
Very
All right, and you had a question about
Oh, yeah.
additional NRC members.
Well, that's on the communications thing, so we can start talking about that if you want.
Okay, is that the end of the agenda for this? Is there anything else on the agenda besides this? That's it.
We didn't actually have this. That was all business. Communications. So I just listed 4 things. The third thing was the application status update. Oh no, that's Teresa USA. And our 4th thing is the interview. So if you want to talk about interviews first, we can do that.
What's the interviews?
So yeah, we got on top of the application from William Foster, who's, we don't need to re-interview William. We've already made a recommendation about him and he's still interested. There were 2 new applications submitted. So what I'd like to propose is that I send you those applications and we organize a time to interview those people that is convenient before the February meeting. And it would be kind of a targeted thing where it's a 20-minute interview for each person and then we're done. And the mayor can come listen in if she wants. Or the recommendation gets forwarded to the mayor after the meeting. And we, give the option to do it via Zoom or in person. We do it in person, we can do it here. We do a Zoom, or we do a hybrid. Yeah. But it is a chunkier schedule during the holidays. So wanted to ask you about that.
Dates did we recommended?
Let's see.
I'm gonna be out of town the last week of December.
Yeah, okay.
When do the positions become vacated?
End of the year.
Okay.
Mhm. Now, we don't have to interview before December. We can interview whenever. You know? So, if it gets pushed into January, that's fine too. I think it's probably more realistic at this point.
It's fine with me.
I'm always. No,
It's not gonna disrupt any business if we wait till January.
I don't think so. We function, you know, as a committee, even if we're not a full 7 members, you know, I'm still a quorum of 4, so. Yeah.
The commissioners are sworn in at the first meeting in January, is that right?
I think so. I think that's a charter thing, so I don't think we messed with that one. Yeah.
We had a conversation at one point about expanding the maximum number of individuals permitted on this committee. And I guess my impression from the meeting when we discussed this was that we wanted, like, we had 3 people interview and we left them all. We what happens to that? Because Denise also wanted William to be a current active member, and that nobody should, with relevant experience and should be denied on the basis of that 7, because other committees are larger that have similar sort of purview.
Are the numbers charter specified?
They're in the code. I thought they were in the bylaws. They're in the code, so it require a code amendment to expand the size of the committee. Yeah.
They're not more like guidelines.
No, they're shall be 7. Number of the members shall.
Is this like a request to change?
Well, I think it's a city commission decision.
Yeah, I think it is too. I mean, I think if the natural resource committee, people's, you probably want to approve everybody that comes online. I mean, I'm sorry we couldn't get the third person on because of the limits, but I think it's a case of getting an argument in terms of diversity. What might be one component you might put into it, or something. So yeah, I think if you felt as a body, or we felt as a body, excuse me, that'd be nice to have a larger membership. I think we just ask the commission to consider it.
Yeah, we don't ever have to have that number. I mean, it's just like, it seems silly to turn people away just because of the arbitrary number.
If you had a pool of applicants that you'd interviewed and that were still remained interested throughout the course of the year, then the mayor could appoint as needed just to keep the committee full? Or are you saying that the committee should expand beyond 7?
I mean, I didn't even think of that. That's an interesting.
That's what I would say.
Yeah. I mean, that would make sense also, but maybe.
I think that if I were on the commission, I'd be very reluctant to have an open-ended size of the committee.
Yeah, I think
because that could go into every single other committee that you have and so forth.
Wait.
And certain of those committees are looking for very specific qualifications.
Did you say open-ended?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't mean open-ended, just adding a couple spots. Yeah. Like 9 instead of 7. I don't know. Or 10. I mean, compared to other committees.
You always want it odd.
This DIC. Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So like the DIC in PrAC, like PrAC is huge. There's like so many people on PrAC. And it seems like, why isn't there allowed the same number? Like, there's no comparable, I mean, to NRC, but I think PrAC is maybe the closest in terms of like the types of discussions that we have. And they have so many people. Like 15 people. Maybe it's not 15, but it's a lot. It's a significant amount more than we have on NRC.
Well, it's just as commissioners and 2 appointed.
Right.
And that's by state law. I think that's state law.
Could it say they have a minimum of 7 and maximum of 9 or something?
Do we have a minimum currently?
Well, as a 7-member committee, our minimum to function is 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we've been pretty small in the past, like, we haven't had 7 consistently, unfortunately. Yeah.
Not always, if we only had 4 members on the committee and, we need 3 to make a decision. That's a call. Yeah, so it's whatever.
What a good spot we're in. That,
You're in a grand spot.
first time since I've been a part of it.
Me too.
Not having any
Me
space.
too, and well qualified to boot. Yeah. Yeah, it's a nice position. So January, we'll try to, I'll bounce some dates off of y'all.
So just to clarify, what is our plan for, like, what, are we gonna ask the commission if it's possible to change the code, or what is the consensus here as to what we're doing?
You don't want to do that at the next commission meeting. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't make a decision on that now. I mean, this is what we want before the next commission.
Okay.
So that can be like the next,
Okay.
if that's
Yeah.
amenable.
Yeah, I mean, they may, there needs to be a majority of commissioners who support some or all of this letter, and there may only be, maybe some who support a Canopy assessment. And I just don't know. But I think getting it all in one letter as a solid set of recommendations is the key before they decide to direct staff to go about amending the codes.
Okay.
We amend code all the time. It doesn't, usually we do it as a grant supported type thing. For example, with the CFAC, you can get grants for it. But if it's just sort of a house cleaning, Oregon City initiated code amendment, we don't need a grant to do it. We just get city commission to direct us to do it.
All right, so we'll find some date in January to discuss
Yeah.
the final
So
draft, and then well, you can see, we'll send an email, is that okay?
yeah.
I don't want to wait till meeting,
No.
share the final draft. Okay, so we'll share, I'll have Pete send out an email with the final draft.
So it'd be like 2 things there, interviews and then a decision on the draft, potentially.
In January in a meeting. Is that-
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, I was thinking we would make the agreement to the changes in this meeting
Yeah, sure.
pending the discussed edits, including the cost of, current costs, numbers of the current spending
Okay.
on our horticulture, and then that's done, and then we'll shift to NRC interviews
Okay.
and discussion.
Yeah.
Recommending a code change to increase max numbers.
Yeah.
So that way, this won't be the agenda for June.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, unless something,
So just so you know where the NRC resides in the code. Somewhere. Okay, but almost done. Administration and personnel. HRBs, civil service. Chapter 2.56, Natural Resources Committee. There is hereby cured and consisting of 7 members, blah, 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 blah. That's where it resides. Okay, next up on communication.
I didn't know that our members were appointed for different lengths of time.
Initially,
Is that how it is?
because when you look on they have the software that tracks the terms for each position, each person.
So everyone's not like.
So, yeah, so it doesn't all expire at once. We have 2 expiring at the end of this year, and then you guys continue on. Yeah, to keep the continuity of the core. Okay, so that brings me to, we'll work backwards. Tree City USA application, I am behind on my compilation of data, but I hope to have it done by Friday. And then it has to be submitted to ODF deadline by Monday evening. So that will include the traditional numbers, trees removed, pruned, that sort of thing. But it also will talk about what we did this year for Arbor Day and various other things. So that's something we do every year. And I'll share that data with you guys. The Friends of Trees planting event is the 14th. I neglected to add a 1 before the 4. So they'll meet at Rivercrest Park and then filter out in the neighborhoods to do some planting. I don't know if any of you guys have ordered a tree yet or through that. You have?
Getting our yard.
Nice. In the past. Oh, okay. Yeah. So I think there's still trees available. And let's see. On the pollinator garden project at the swimming pool. So I just wanted to give you a little background. Basically, when Tom came in, he was like, I want to try to get rid of as much lawn area as I can. So this was a voluntary project. We seldom saw projects like this from the Parks Department because they have such a maintenance backlog and they don't have time to do projects like this. So there's a minimum spec criteria that planning has for these landscaping changes. They have to be designed by a landscape architect if it's over 500 square feet. And then it's a public project. It's got to have some time to establish. So, the planting plan was drawn up by the landscape architect that they hired. And they're supposed to follow that. Otherwise, they're in compliance with their site plan application. So I don't know what all happened and that sort of thing, but I would say be patient, give it some time. Because we want to support park staff to do this sort of thing again. So I get it. I understand that there are concerns about the right and wrong way to establish a pollinator garden, but this is something we should get behind, in my opinion, because I just don't see this kind of thing coming out of the Parks Department very often. And when we do, we need to support it. So anyway, it's a type 1 decision. Type 1 decisions are clear and objective. They cannot be appealed. It's up to the Parks Department if they want to change it and change any of the planting plan. And they can do that. It's not a big deal for us to modify our approval. It's really up to them. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Is there opportunity for feedback in future projects? So to be supportive?
Yeah, I mean, Tom came and talked to us about the one that they did down at Saginaw Trail, River Trail. So yes, I think we just say to Tom, get NRC input on any future projects that come up. But I think this one was because it was in a park, technically. Swimming pool's a park, so it's like a crack. Yeah.
Crack didn't have a whole lot of.
They didn't have a lot of input in it, or did he talk to them?
No, there was definitely presentation,
Okay.
but it was more kind of like, this is an update on,
Okay.
there wasn't,
Yeah.
I feel like the NRC would probably have more relevant experience
Yeah,
because we've been talking about pollinator gardens so much.
yeah.
I totally see what you're saying with supporting. I think the ways that NRC could support would be like consulting on maybe some of the details of such projects in the future. I know that I was working with Tom, and we had gotten a bunch of seeds from the Xerxes Society, and with the way that the site was prepped, I don't think they were planted, just because like landscape fabric, is water permeable, but it's really hard for seeds to germinate, especially when there's like 6 inches of wood chips on top.
Yeah.
And so I think in order to make the best use of the resources that we have, like there were certain site prep things that could have easily been made to accommodate the gifts that we received. And I think that kind of paying attention to that in the future is really significant.
Okay.
Because more than half of the species, I think, were given via seed. And I don't know what's being done with that seed. It was a significant amount of seed, and I don't think that can be integrated into the garden. And the hedgerow, I'm not entirely sure if there were additional plants sourced, but the hedgerow, like the grant was for 2 different kinds of plant material. One was the hedgerow, and the other was a large quantity of seed. And about maybe like a quarter of the total area was for hedgerow, and then the majority was for seed. And so that's 75% of the total. I don't know what's going to go there. Like they're very sparse, I think.
Unless the seeds
So small decisions, but I think ultimately like kind of significant in terms of like the species, and then also the landscaping fabric doesn't allow for ground nesting bees to go in there. And I think in terms of pollinator gardens, having nesting sites is really significant. And so, yes, we support the parks, of course. I think of course. But these are significant. If it's specifically
during the design stage.
Yeah, if it's specifically intended to be for pollinators, like these are really, they're significant decisions.
Yeah.
Okay. But I'm curious, like what everyone else is. I know William Foster had brought this up as well, and I think it's an important discussion to have.
Is William on track?
No, but he had I sent out an email.
That's fine.
Yeah, so I think we welcome future pollinator garden project designs proposed for future park installations or any, city projects. Given that crack seems less able to provide that specialized input.
Were there any other things in the future? Sure.
I don't know if there's any other pollinator garden projects on the docket. It would be good to know, like, how well this one establishes, and like what's going to happen with the seed or any other additional plantings that might need to happen if there's a lot of open space. Which is probably not what pollinator gardens should have too much. So we'll see what happens in the summer and how it looks, and then we can maybe.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll need to be some replacements.
Yeah. Okay.
Seed is also just like a really economic way of like creating pollinator gardens. And so having a site that's prepped in a way that allows for seed, I think could really save a lot of money. Even if the prep costs more, you're going to be spending like a fraction. I mean, you can buy like 5 pounds of California poppy for like a couple $100, and that could literally be like many thousands of square feet, as opposed to like, potted plants, which are like 10 to 20 bucks.
Container plants.
Yeah, it just saves so much money.
So future designs should have more, structure, diversity, different site prep to allow for what you're talking about, as opposed to just a formal container planting. Yeah.
If they're going to be designed as specifically for pollinator gardens, I think that there's a tremendous wealth of resources on how to prep a site specifically for that intention. And Xerxes, who we got all the plants from, provides like 5 different ways to prep sites that don't involve landscape fabric. Some of them take longer. That's the trade-off. But are generally not more expensive. A lot of the materials can be reused. So like the plastic, if you're like using silverization, can be reused. So that's a one-time cost.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, most of them are pretty cost effective, especially if you use like chip prop or, it doesn't have to be like all new materials,
Right.
anything like that.
Huh. Well, I'll pass that along to them.
Is there any other communication items? It could be announcements or opportunities that would be valuable for the NRC. I have some, but like
Go for it.
So with the Tree City USA applications comes grants opened for Arbor Day celebrations. Booster grants are available. So those will be coming from ODF. So when those come up, and there's interest from the staff side to receive a max of $500, no match, a booster grant to boost Arbor Day celebration.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're interested in that, information is coming to do that, but we could provide a letter of support for anything like that. And there is Oregon Urban and Community Forestry Awards for the opening up. So we can recognize leaders, people doing excellent work in arboriculture and urban forestry within our networks, staff, organizations, businesses. It doesn't have to be a specific arborist. It could be a volunteer in the community, or even like a nonprofit or a business organization that's doing really work that should be recognized. So those are going to be announced on the first of the year. I'm on that committee that helps make those decisions. So I would love to see someone from Morgan City.
Yeah. Arbor Day coming up in April. Usually the mayor likes to declare Arbor Month. Just to capture all of the month. But I think parks will be taking a bigger role this year. So
If we can pass the news,
yeah.
the opportunity to park and track if they have an interest in participating.
Yeah. Okay.
That's all I.
The only other news I have is that we're close to hiring another assistant planner because we lost one 3 weeks ago. They moved off. So we'll be back up and staffed again, which would be nice.
Who was the assistant planner?
Molly Gorin, she was with us for 2.5 years, but she went, she's in Hawaii.
Oh, that's very different from North. Yeah.
So who can say no to that? But yeah, we had some really good candidates. It's tough to winnow them down who to interview. So there's a lot of interest in the position, but I think we'll have them on board by hopefully a couple of weeks. So bit of a scramble in the interim. What else is going on? There is another item that's not on this list. So you may have heard about this, but maybe not. We have a floodplain management overlay district and floodplain regulations that allow us to get flood insurance and qualify as a community. We have a community CERT rating through FEMA. So FEMA was sued in 2009 by various environmental groups because their floodplain regulations that were promulgating didn't take into account the Endangered Species Act. And for Oregon, for some reason, through this lawsuit process, Oregon got picked out as being the only state that FEMA said, you've got to provide habitat, no net loss of habitat within your floodplain regulations. Normally that would be within our natural resource overlay district or Willamette River Greenway or some other natural resources code that we have. But because of the nature of this lawsuit and because it hasn't actually been gone through the EIS process yet, it's called pre-implementation measures mandated by FEMA for all Oregon City communities to adopt by originally they said December 1st, you have to, and they announced it in August. Yeah. And so there was a lot of pushback. The governor pushed back, said, you don't understand how rules are made in Oregon with the land use system and blah, 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 blah. And FEMA said, so what? And I'm summarizing. You've got to tell FEMA what measures you're going to adopt. And there are three basic measures. You either do a permit by permit review on every floodplain development that comes in, which I think we do about 3 a year. And you make them show you that they complied with the requirement for known land loss. It boils down to what the ESA talks about, taking the species, and we're talking about the salmon in the Willamette River. And it also affects the southern killer whale population in Puget Sound. So anyway, that's the first choice, and that's the default. So for most communities, if you don't pass the model code by December 1st, you default to the permit by permit. So that's what we do. And then we've told them we would adopt the model code by mid-2025. It's the deadline. And then certain aspects of the model code, they look a lot like, well, they function a lot like the Natural Resources Overlay District, except that it prescribes a 175-foot habitat area from top of bank of the Willamette River, and ours goes to 200. The vegetative corridor. The difference between the NROD and the ESA is that it's a no net loss and no net change in impervious area. Mm-hmm. And the impervious area thing is the big one.
Yeah.
So, that's something new.
Does impervious area include existing bedrock?
Don't know.
Because that's kind of what our.
Well, you know why we have to have 200 feet?
Why?
Because I did it when I was on the commission.
Okay.
Yeah, we only had something like on the street only about 50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we did, because a lot happens in that 200 feet.
Yeah.
Good. And then the third option is don't allow any development of floodplain. So naturally, there are cities like Tillamook County and ports that are really freaking out about this because they can't dredge, they can't approve any development, they can't do anything until they show FEMA that they're doing. And these communities, they're saying the city must do it, not the applicant. The city must show no net loss, which is very interesting. Anyway, it's called the biological opinion was issued by NIMFS, National Marine Fisheries, and we have to comply with that biological opinion. So it's new, it's different. Never seen anything like it yet. We'll probably be doing a presentation on that. Even it's a mandate, so we're not going to change anything. It would be interesting to see how it meshes with our existing things. Sorry. That was extra.
I did not hear that.
So yeah, I guess our next meeting is pretty targeted on those things.
Yep, I have discussed increasing NRC membership and interviewing.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any other comments, announcements? Okay, done on time. Dakota, anything from you?
Oh, hang on. Let me get you on the screen. Sorry.
And I've got nothing. Just listening, and thank you so much for letting me zoom in as well. That's much appreciated.
Take a peek. What is that?
Western Columbine.
Yeah, it looks like a Columbine.
Is that a Columbine behind you?
It is a Columbine. Yep.
It's native.
My favorite wildflower. Yeah.
Well, it looks like, is that a native one we got? Ours is orange or reddish.
When I looked up the picture, this is supposed to be the Western, you know.
Yeah, I've seen the woods. Yeah.
Very cool.
Now been immortalized.
My other background is the bird that people can't figure out. So the flower's better.
Thanks, Dakota.
I got something to say afterwards to you though.
Want a motion to adjourn, or do I just?
I think just adjourn.
Okay, I move to adjourn at 8:27.
8:27 adjourned.